the way most governments think today started with the Chicago School of Economics, Milton Friedman. And their basic theory is control the money supply and everything else sorts itself out. So today, I was in Peterborough earlier today, I'm coming back, and they're on the radio talking about the rate of inflation, the Bank of Canada's efforts to keep inflation between 1% and 3%. Well, what an incredibly strange thing to be leading the news. You know, we've got 9% unemployment. Our institution should be saying, how are we going to keep people working and measuring the number of people working, and that should be the #1 job. And that all comes because of that economic theory. And as an economist, I would argue very strongly that theory is wrong. And you add to that this push that some people call neoliberalism to privatize everything, and you end up with very strange results, both economically and socially. In Sweden, for example, in Stockholm, when cable television came, they said, hey, this is a public asset. We'll build the cable, and if you, in the free market, want to run a television service, you contract with us, the city makes money off it, and anybody who wants to run a television service puts it over the cable. We'll contrast that with us, and we gave Rogers Media a complete monopoly to do it. Doesn't make the government any money, and it has lots of other consequences economically and socially. And I think all of that comes back to this idea that was popularized by Reagan and Thatcher, is that if government just gets out of the way, everything's fine. Well, we know it isn't. You know, that's why nearly 50 million people in the US are in poverty, because they've forgotten how to come together collectively in the way we did in the late 1930s and during the war, and say, everybody's in it together. And sometimes that means government action. Sometimes it means leaving markets. But I think that economic theory is at the heart of a lot of the problems. And I think what's happened over the past few months is people are starting to re-examine all of that. That's why Occupy is so important to me.
I'm going to paint a different picture. We have the representative for Occupy Toronto talk about the noble spirit.
Yes.
I want to talk about those who use ruthless, murderous greed. They once thought slavery was a good business model. And then they went on to colonialism. And now we have a group of people who think destabilizing our planet's climate and destroying the web of life are a good business model. And I have a potential solution. A proposal has been made to have the International Criminal Court prosecute environmental crimes.
Yes.
If you want to check out This Is Ecocide, on the 30th of September, there was a demonstration trial in the UK Supreme Court, and we live streamed it. Destabilizing my planet's climate is a crime. And as evidence, the CEO and board of directors of the automobile industry built fleets of Hummers and sabotaged the electric vehicle as we tried to live sustainably. That is criminal conduct
and environmental damage. So I think in the neoliberal moment, we became convinced that the program of less government was successful, and that we're now in a situation where there's less government. But that's not, strictly speaking, right. If you look at it from a legal point of view, there is law everywhere. It's just incredibly permissive and incredibly disciplinary in ways that are not compatible with linking political and economic life in a productive way. I think if you were Greece and you said, well, what's the problem? It wouldn't be that there's no government. The problem would be that there's a cram down by governments that they have no participation in. And I think if we look at the international environmental situation, we have a tendency to think that law and the environment, law protects the environment. But of course, if you're an environmental despoiler, law offers you a great deal. So we have a legal order at the global level that makes it your right to undermine the environmental future of society. This is a situation in which we have a mismatch between private rights that travel everywhere and public rights that don't. So we're not in the situation where the absence of government is the problem. The situation we're in is that the government is structured in the wrong way and is defending the wrong things and privileging the wrong behaviors. All that could be changed.
Because the government legislates minimum pay. Could the government also legislate maximum pay?
Hey, that's nice.
A lot of agreement is with the corporations. Unfortunately, just like you say, the smart people working on the top are not being honest. They manipulate the market, they boost the value of their corporation, and they cut the staff that work, the smart people who work for them. And that is the reality.
Now, this sort of thing is a structural problem, a systematic problem. This is sort of why I'm interested in the movement. It's been my main area of focus as a system designer and UX designer. And something that needs to be on the reading list of everyone here is the liquid democracy, the concept of liquid democracy. In Spain, they're trying to implement a system like this. There's a platform called Agora. The full name is in Spanish, so I can't really. And the basic premise is they want to institute a party whose platform is determined in real time, policy by the people who vote that platform. So it would be the most direct and representative form of democratic government. My question would be, are you aware of this as a concept? What challenges would we have in instituting this here, and would you?
How successful social movements work in a sense, and just thinking back and sort of both as a historian and as a design thinker. I mean, there's really three elements to these. I mean, one is to build a culture, and I think that's one of the really incredibly important pieces of this process. And I think Matt's comments are interesting. So it's how you build a culture that really does have cultural dimensions. I mean, you know, music, art, design, kind of an experiential culture that's on the ground, that has an organized form. And if you look at the 30s, for example, in Canada, culture was an incredibly important part of people being able to move towards alternate systems, alternate structures. So that's one of the pieces. The second is to really begin to look at what are the alternate modes of organization. And the Agora concept is interesting. I mean, it's very much one that can only be realized with the kind of technology that we have in the world. And now with social media and the kind of ability to adjust and change and you know, kind of build platforms. But we also have to stabilize, you know, a platform for action. So I think that's an interesting tension. But the second point that I want to make is it's really important to design our way out of this. You know, to not only build, you know, a critique and a culture of critique and a culture of celebration, but to design our way out at both the local and at global level, to really work together to try and make new kinds of economies. You know, when I think about the 48 million in the US or whatever the number is in Canada, I mean, we need to build new economies. We need to build ways of creating other forms of wealth that are shared forms of wealth, and we need to put our best minds together to do that. So that's the second piece of it, really, is to create new structures. So design a way out, build a culture, and begin to experiment and model new structures that can be scaled up. I think that would be the third piece of it, is to really test and begin to implement those structures.
Hi, I'm a local businesswoman and an economist, and I just wanted to say a couple of comments. One is, we're caught in a financial straitjacket. I see that in Europe, and we're told that there's no money for anything. I just want to remind people that money is an accounting system. There's no money mine that we're going to go and find a new stash of money that's going to bail us out. And in business, we write things down all the time. You know, we declare bankruptcy. We do all sorts of things, and we can do anything. Really, we have the tools to do absolutely anything in this situation. We're not bound by anything, and so like everything's available to us. Okay, so anybody who says we can't do it, there's no money, and there's this straitjacket, just don't listen. That's complete rubbish. The second thing I want to say is, like, well, I believe in governments. The governments can do things. I think we can do things before government too. And for example, some of the largest concentrations of funds, capital in Canada, are labor union pension funds. And in the 1980s, labor unions decided to fight against apartheid in South Africa. And by divesting in South Africa, they brought de Klerk. and the Nationalist Party took table and released Mandela and brought majority rule. So right now, if labor unions decided that they would not invest in companies that paid their management more than 20 times median,
yes.
if they decided they would do that, that would change the game plan out there. And for example, the government would follow the parade, perhaps, like RSPs, for instance. That's a tremendous privilege to put your money in RSPs and get a tax shelter. So maybe it should be changed that you can only do that. Companies can only qualify for that if they pay their management 20 times median. And you might say, I know that Mr. Flaherty said, oh, well, that won't change anything. But perception is reality, and it's important for justice. I think it would change things. I mean, one guy earning $10 million pays much less tax than a guy earning $1 million and 200 other people earning $45,000. The other thing, too, is we need a new kind of bond. It doesn't exist out there, but once again, pension funds demanded it. You know, special kind of Canada pension savings bond to build the subway. My grandparents' generation financed the subway, and it was equally expensive for them, and they just came out of depression and a war. So why can't we do it? So but once again, if we lead by example, people say, oh, I can't control my pension fund. That's rubbish. You guys hire those guys. So, just lean on them and say, we want our money. You're not going to lose your money. You're actually going to strengthen the economy. And the thing is, you'll have pensions, you won't get laid off your jobs, and your kids will actually have a future.
It doesn't come back. It's not to burn the bridge that crosses, it's to blow it. I think that we should take away the means that private institutions have of subjugating us. We should nationalize a lot of things in Canada. The Bank of Canada is one of them. We should only have one bank in this country, and it should be the Bank of Canada. It should not charge interest. It makes it a matter. By the charging of interest on money that's created out of nothing, creates a mathematical possibility of everyone ever paying it back. That's what's going on in the world right now. Simple as that. You create the money for principal purchases, but you don't create the money that they ask for in interest. It doesn't exist. And eventually, that's what happens. You end up with people losing out on everything they own. Because the money was never there. It's no one's fault. It's just the institution, that's all. It's the way. Nationalize our national resources. Provide the most fertile ground for free enterprise anywhere in this world by giving industry the cheapest materials to serve ourselves. Trade amongst ourselves. Don't allow cheap imports in Canada.
On a thing that we need to have put into effect regularly, called full cost accounting. In other words, you don't allow decisions to be made with the externalities left out of the decision. Is there anyone up there that can figure out how to implement that? I know the Tobin tax is supposed to be one of those things that helps, but I would love to hear you explain full cost accounting and how that could pull us out of some of the holes we've dug for ourselves. Like this is a fracking, which will take away all our groundwater, and a few other things.
But the Tobin tax, I could say a little bit about, originated by the Canadian-born James Tobin, and originally he was thinking that a tax on particular financial transactions would throw sand in the wheels of volatile capital markets. It's been converted and taken up into a much broader financial transactions tax on a wide variety of activities within markets for the purposes of redistribution. Now, the reason I want to emphasize states is because they have the capacity to organize ourselves and do such things. There are some things that legally we're prohibited from doing because states have committed themselves to not doing so. And that's nationalization. The gentleman talked before about nationalization. That's simply not on, unless we undo some of the legal constraints that we have committed to. States all over the world have committed they've committed not to do that. The financial transactions tax is something that is on the table. Germany, France, and former Prime Minister Gordon Brown were pushing for that in the aftermath of the beginning of the global recession, and Stephen Harper made it his personal mission to kill that at the Toronto G20 and succeeded. Dispersed cabinet ministers all over the world, right, with the mission of killing it. And that's, again, the difference that our representatives can make.
More of a concern. I have First Nations in this country. And one of my concerns, and some of the things I've seen with globalization and privatization, is that it's pretty merciless. There's a lot of overdevelopment in this land, and it's very profit-driven. And I think if we don't pay attention to what First Nations have to say and collaborate more to a dialogue, we're headed for an economic catastrophe. And there's a prophecy that I'm just going to share with you.